I want to welcome in our all-star political panel. They are back with us now. Emerald Robinson, Mark Halperin, Betsy McCoy, and Chris Arps. I want to play you a very confusing soundbite, so make sure you got both ears listening to this. This is Dr. Anthony Fauci. Take a listen.
If you look at the projection, I would imagine by the time we get to April, that will be what I would call, for better wording, open season. Namely, virtually everybody and anybody in any category could start to get vaccinated. So that timeline will probably be prolonged maybe into mid to late May and early June. That's fine. But what you've got to be careful of is when vaccines become available and when they have actually been successfully administered.
Emerald, he's 80 years old now. I do not know if the cheese is starting to slip off the cracker with Dr. Tony Fauci, but he literally just said 3 different months inside of a 2-day period when he was mentioning when vaccine rollout will be available. I don't know why. I know the Trump administration did it, but I don't know why the Biden administration wasn't like, Dr. Fauci, thank you for your 40 years of service, but please, thank you. We're gonna take a break.
Felt that he's been pretty beneficial to them so far, don't you? Especially in the last Biden team really liked Dr. Fauci. I liked your term you said before the break, Fauciing, because it has become synonymous with going back and forth and flip-flopping on positions, and that's what we've seen since day one.
Right.
Of him coming out and starting to talk to the American people and going on TV, is that he flip-flops on what data really says, what policy positions are, what is beneficial in combating COVID. And most American people just don't listen to Dr. Fauci anymore. I don't know why he's still in that position. And I will say, I don't think it's due to age. I've talked to the man. I think it's according to who he's talking to and who he thinks his audience is and what they want to hear.
Exactly. It's so, I say that tongue in cheek as well. I think Dr. Fauci has his faculties about him, but I honestly, I see him and I'm like, people are just so over this guy. Like I'm Fauci'd out. Emerald, we say Fauciing, referring to like maybe his credibility. There is a term in the dating world, Chris. It's called Fauciing. It's a trend right now if you're on a dating app, which nobody on this panel is on, I think. But basically it's when you immediately say no to somebody. There is now a column where you can say where you are on coronavirus. Do you buy into double masking? Do you buy, what's your vaccine status? And you can get, quote, Fauci'd if you're not up to par with the person you're trying to match with.
Interesting.
Yes. This is something that all the young people are doing. I didn't know about, but apparently, Chris, it's a thing.
It's ironic because last week my wife and I were just talking about how do you date in a COVID world. I mean, do you tell people, hey, we're going out Friday, but I'm going to need a COVID test 72 hours before we go out?
Right.
You know, how does that work? Luckily, I'm married. I don't have to worry about that. But, you know, as Emerald said earlier, you know, Dr. Fauci has skipped all around. We were for masks, we weren't for masks, and now this latest dust up. So I have stopped listening to Dr. Fauci a long time ago, but unfortunately, and I think a lot of American people give him a lot of credibility because liberals do, because he was seen to be anti-Trump when he was in the administration.
Right, right. Mark,
as they say now, it's not you, it's Fauci.
Touche. That's good.
You know, talking about people dating, I live behind a park and I see all of these. It is apparent dating at first meetups where they're sitting in the park, like socially distanced with their mask on. And it's clearly a date. They have like their wine.
Totally. Outside. Masks. Triple masking. It's just bizarre. Mark, I know that you're a skilled author and journalist. You ever read any Shakespeare, Bill Shakespeare? Remember the old writer from 500 years ago? Romeo and Juliet, all those? Well, teachers across the country are now demanding that Shakespeare be replaced in the curriculum, if I said that properly, with more modern, diverse, and inclusive voices. That means no more Hamlet, no more Macbeth, no more Romeo and Juliet. Here's my take on this, Mark, then Betsy. I hated reading this stuff when I was younger. Hated it. Betsy, we'll start with you. But there's a reason that it's been around for so long. Bill Shakespeare's timeless. That's
right. And parents and educators who really care about kids, academics who have spent their lives studying these pieces of literature should rise up and protest about this culture that is now taking all the classics out of education It's wrong. It's really robbing the next generation of an important part of our heritage, and I'm totally against it.
Chris, did you like Shakespeare in school? By the way, I think that Mark just Fauci'd us. He just left the panel. He's no longer with us. I don't know where he went. He literally just disappeared. But Chris, we'll take it to you.
Actually, I did. That's what was my first exposure to Romeo and Juliet, which I read in high school and some of the other classics. I think what we're seeing in cancel culture right now is not so much the topic of what they're trying to cancel. I think they're just trying to see how far they can go before people just say, this is getting ridiculous. I mean, trying to cancel out classic literature, changing the names of the schools that have the names of our founding fathers, that's ridiculous. I think now, like I said, I think they're just trying to see just how far they can go.
By the way, at least kids in Florida are in the classroom largely and can actually have access to a real Shakespeare textbook. I want to play a soundbite from Governor Ron DeSantis. I guess I didn't realize this, but they've been basically in school, the entire state, since the summertime. Take a listen.
We've been open the whole time since August, and yet we're 34th out of 50 states in D.C. for COVID-19 cases on a per capita basis for children. The Democratic Party puts the interests of education unions and special interests ahead of the well-being of our children and of our families.
Emerald, Joe Biden called Donald Trump, then president, xenophobic a year ago, January, when he canceled flights from China because of the virus. And now and boom, it'll be an executive order, but they're trying to limit flights before spring break, which is really in August, from parts of the country to Florida. So people can't go down there.
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about the school aspect of this, because clearly Joe Biden did a town hall last night and he talked a lot about schools. Even he told the little girl, remember, everybody's fawning over that moment with the little girl, he said that children don't really get COVID. He was noting that the data shows that there's a very low level of transmission amongst children, and that they also don't seem to really pass it to adults. So, but his position on reopening schools remained very murky last night. He contradicted his press secretary and what she had said, but he still didn't give a clear picture. Then you have someone like Ron DeSantis down in Florida saying, look, we've had our schools open. We keep our numbers are still very, very low. And it's making Ron DeSantis look really good.
Yeah, and everybody. Betsy, go ahead. It looks like Mark's back. Mark, you Fauci'd us, didn't you?
Report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention last Friday, which the Biden administration has used as a prop, more or less, to support its very murky position on reopening schools. This CDC report is so anti-science, it could have been written in 1950 or even in 1900. It tells school districts to open the windows and space the desks apart. There is absolutely no discussion of the kinds of technologies that can make schools or office buildings or other interior spaces very safe. It would be like putting out a report on how to treat COVID patients and eliminating all the medications, all the therapeutics that have been devised in the last 50 years, and just say bed rest. That was the scientific level of the CDC report. No discussion of hydrogen peroxide misting, UV light, any of the modern uses of technology to make indoor spaces safe.
Betsy, it makes no sense at all. It would be like if your first day on the job working at a zoo and the first thing it told you about feeding the lions is don't go in the cage. It's all obvious stuff. There's no science involved in these reports.
No science.
Mark, I know that you... Go ahead,
bureaucracy. I was just going to say CDC is such a clear bureaucracy at this point, more than anything scientific, and that's become very clear through this coronavirus crisis.
Mark, did you see the report in New York that said that teachers, before going back into the classroom, should reflect on their whiteness before going back to school?
There's just a giant disconnect between the red America and blue America. And I think it's one of the things that Joe Biden is trying to pretend doesn't exist, but it relates to one of the biggest issues in the whole country right now, which is schools, not just in terms of the pandemic, but in terms of how kids will be taught. And there's just not a lot of clarity from the administration. They're focusing on trying to get through the day rather than setting clear goals and promising to meet them.
Ridiculous. It's just time for kids to get back to school at this point. And Biden campaigned on this. I can't believe that this is where we are a month into his time in office. Panel, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much. Great conversation as always. Mark, glad you could come back and join us there. Good stuff as always.